What do emo bands sing about? Well, lots of things. Relationships, heartbreak, mental health, the struggles of the modern world. But some bands go further than this. Way further. Coheed and Cambria are a perfect example of this. Sure, they sing about all the things I've just mentioned, but they wrap their songwriting in a sprawling science fiction fantasy narrative that makes the Marvel Cinematic Universe look tame. But such a grand vision doesn't come easy. Along the way, there are armed robberies, creative crises, and even a multi-million-dollar weed farm. And no, unlike a lot of the stuff I'm going to discuss, these things aren't fictional. This is the story, or more accurately, the stories, of Coheed and Cambria, a truly unique band in the pantheon of emo and post-hardcore. Coheed and Cambria's story began all the way back in 1995 in Nyack, New York. Teenagers Claudio Sanchez and Travis Stever were in a band called Toxic Parents, but when this band split, they found themselves in search of a new creative outlet. Teaming up with drummer Nate Kelly and bass player John Carlio, they formed Beautiful Loser. But this project lasted only 3 months before an argument over who owed who gas money broke them up. Travis decided to leave, but Claudio, Nate, and John stayed together, forming a three-piece called Shabütie. If you're a Coheed fan, that word might sound a little familiar to you. Shabütie's early stuff was pretty different to the metallic prog-emo of Coheed and Cambria. The guys tried their hands at pop-punk, indie rock, and even a bit of funk before they began writing more complex, emotional post-hardcore tracks. John Carlio left in August 1996, and Michael Todd replaced him on bass. So it was Sanchez, Kelly, and Todd who wrote and recorded the Plan to Take Over the World demo, and then the Penelope EP in 1999. There was a bit more lineup shuffling and member changing to come over the next year. First, Travis Stever returned to the band. Next, Josh Eppert of the band 3 came in to replace Nate Kelly. Now the band had something of a core, and they had a strong musical direction. In 2000, they began to bring this musical direction to life, starting with the Delirium Trigger EP. This would be the final release under the name Shabütie. The band were about to assume their final form and kickstart something epic. Claudio Sanchez is a musician, and he's a damn good musician at that. But he's also something else. He's a comic book superfan and something of an artist and storyteller himself. After releasing Delirium Trigger, Sanchez got to work on adapting some of the EP's songs into comic books. The threads of these comic book stories began to intertwine as characters crossed paths in pursuit of a shared destiny. The first seeds of a vast universe were being sown. From these comic books, 2 characters emerged, one named Coheed and the other named Cambria. Not really feeling the name Shabütie anymore, the band adopted the names of these characters as their own. Through Claudio's artwork, the band not only had a name, they had an artistic driving force that was going to shape their music for years to come. This was the Amory Wars, a story that melded science fiction and fantasy against a galactic backdrop of 78 planets and 7 stars. Between these planets and stars, powerful beams of energy hold the complex universes together. These beams are known as the Keywork, and this would form the inspiration for the band's famous logo. But the band hadn't recorded Delirium Trigger just as a jumping-off point for comic books and graphic novels. They'd recorded it because they were a band, a musical project, and so they had to make music. The richness and complexity of Shabütie had attracted the attention of Equal Vision Records, and the legendary hardcore label agreed to sign the band once they'd morphed into Coheed and Cambria. In March 2002, Equal Vision put out the second stage Turbine Blade, Coheed and Cambria's first full-length album, and our first introduction to the sheer scale of the group's vision. The album is very much a concept record. It holds within its tracks a narrative that will form into the sprawling Amory Wars saga. But at first listen, it's not quite clear what the story is. What is clear is that we're dealing with a truly special set of emo and post-hardcore talents. From the glistening opening riffs of Time Consumer to the metal-inspired Neverender, C&C are taking us on a journey, even if the cryptic lyrics don't always clue us in on precisely where we're going. Oh, and let's not forget Devil in Jersey City, with its cutesy nod to the band's previous name, Shabütie, right at the beginning. Coheed might have been a prog-emo band, but they could do pop-punk and melodic hardcore better than most. As for the plot behind the album, the band gave fans a series of 10 comic books to make everything a little clearer. Coheed and Cambria Kilgannon are a married couple living in the Heaven's Fence collection of stars and planets. When General Mayo Deftenwolf informs the couple they're members of a dormant terrorist cell and infected with a deadly virus, their lives are turned upside down. They must do battle with the forces of evil to save their family and save their universe. The album was an underground success, and the band were eager to follow it up with the next chapter in the Amory Wars saga. In October 2003, they released In Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3, set 10 years after Second Stage Turbine Blade. The second LP charts the adventures of Claudio Kilgannon, the son of Coheed and Cambria Kilgannon, as he battles enemies Supreme Tri-Mage Wilhelm Ryan and General Mayo Deftenwolf. It might have been a high concept, but it was packed with great tunes. Devil in Jersey City had been catchy enough to score some airplay, but tracks like A Favor House Atlantic and Blood Red Summer pushed the band to the next level. These tracks were part of a wider story, but they were also fantastic indie rock pop punk songs laden with hooks and melodies. But the album was packed with darker moments too. The 3-song Camper Valorium Suite ends with the brooding, menacing Al the Killer, showcasing Coheed at their doomy best. There are songs of gentle delicacy too, like album closer Light and the Glass, which enraptured fans with its fragile beauty. The album deservedly went gold, and when Columbia Records came calling in 2004, it became clear that Coheed and Cambria weren't going to stay an underground band for long. Now on a major label, Coheed and Cambria wanted to do something big for album number 3. So they did. Good Apollo, I'm Burning Star 4 Volume 1 From Fear Through the Eyes of Madness takes a long time to say, but it takes a long time to play too. 71 minutes, 21 seconds to be exact. The record begins with the lush orchestral composition Keeping the Blade, before stripping everything back for the gentle and playful Always and Never. But it's track 3, Welcome Home, where the album really kicks into gear. Starting with an intricate Led Zeppelin-esque acoustic guitar riff, then lurching into a dark, mean-sounding first verse. This is Coheed paying homage to the hard rock legends of years gone by. Sounding like Black Sabbath reimagined for the new millennium, the third Coheed album arrives in a big way. Tracks like The Suffering and 10-Speed are classic melodic emo from Coheed and Cambria, while the band embraces progressive rock fully with the 4-part closing suite, The Willing Well. It's epic stuff, and it leaves you exhausted once you reach the end. But you're only halfway through. 2 years later, the band released Part 2, Good Apollo, I'm Burning Star 4, Volume 2, No World for Tomorrow. It's a bit shorter this one, just an hour. Oh, and it throws fans a bit of a curveball by featuring Taylor Hawkins of Foo Fighters on drums, after the departure of Josh Eppert. The albums were accompanied by graphic novels under the same name, which add more detail to the ongoing story of Claudio Kilgannon, his brother Jesse, and the Amory Wars villain General Deftenwolf. By now, Coheed and Cambria were a huge deal, and every new album was met with eager anticipation. The record climbed to an impressive number 6 on the Billboard 200, while single The Running Free soared in the modern and mainstream rock charts. Coheed and Cambria could seemingly do no wrong, but they were about to enter the most difficult years of their career. Years that would almost see them turning their back on the Amory Wars universe for good. For 2010's Year of the Black Rainbow, the band went back to the beginning. No, they didn't rehash the funk metal of Shabütie. Instead, with Chris Penny of Dillinger Escape Plan replacing Taylor Hawkins on drums, they recorded a prequel to the Amory Wars universe they'd built. This was something they'd planned all along. When I created the idea of the Amory Wars, and the first record being the Second Stage Turbine Blade, and that being the second part of the story, I always knew at the end I would revisit the beginning, Claudio said of the album. I think for those fans that are truly invested in the concept, it's really a necessity. I don't know if it was necessary to make prequels for Star Wars, but this is where Coheed and Cambria came from, the origins of who they are. The difference between Year of the Black Rainbow and Star Wars Episode 1 is that Black Rainbow is actually good. By this point in their career, no one could really touch CNC in terms of grandiose, hook-laden emo rock. The Mars Volta were really their only peer by now, and TMV were mining a much weirder, though no less brilliant, seam of expression. Coheed could get weird too, but there's just a lot more catchy melody to their sound. In their lighter moments, Coheed could have been a pop band. You can't really say that about the dudes from El Paso. Black Rainbow brought their contract with Columbia to an end. The record sold 51,000 in its first week, and the major label was surely desperate to keep Coheed on their roster. But Coheed had other ideas. They wanted to do their own thing. So they decided to hit the studio and record the next LP on their own label. Before they made it to the studio, there was the small matter of a tour with Soundgarden to think about. Touring with one of alt rock's most legendary outfits should have been a career highlight, but it turned out to be a nightmare. Bassist Michael Todd had had serious problems for a while. Back in 2006, he'd missed a bunch of dates on the European tour after going into rehab. Now, in July 2011, Todd found himself in trouble again. He was arrested in Mansfield, Massachusetts for armed robbery and possession of narcotics after holding up a Walgreens. He pled guilty and was sentenced to 1 year of house arrest, followed by 3 years probation. This shock hit Coheed hard, but they had a vision, and that vision had to be realized. They hit the studio and they recorded Afterman. The Afterman sessions birthed 2 albums, Ascension and Descension. Both are prequels to the previous Amory Wars albums, but with their grand vision complete, these records focus on different characters. That of Sirius Amory, the scientist who was the first man to enter Heaven's Edge's keywork, and Mary Amory. Sirius and Mary were inspired, at least in part, by Claudio's own grandparents. The band were now exploring new storylines within that same universe, basically expanding the universe in the way the Marvel team have. They might not have been making Marvel movie money, but the band were doing pretty well out on their own. Both Afterman albums went top 10 in the Billboard 200. Coheed were doing just fine without Columbia's backing, and without Todd. But there were more shocks to come. The guys weren't teenagers anymore. They were young men in their early 30s, and they had lives outside of music. Claudio in particular wanted to take a break. Along with his wife, fellow comic book artist and writer Chandra Eckert, he decided to go out and see some more of the world before settling down with kids. Claudio and Chandra headed out on the road, not on tour, on a personal voyage of discovery that took them to Paris, LA, and finally Brooklyn. While they were away, the unthinkable happened. We found out while we were away our house had been broken into and turned into a weed farm, Claudio said. It was a $300,000 a month operation. Needless to say, this made it really hard for Claudio to get into the creative space he needed to write the next record. I had a hard time getting inside the characters in my head. I had an identity crisis, which made me start thinking about what Coheed should be, because it didn't feel natural to write a concept record. And then, Chandra became pregnant. Suddenly, the couple had a whole new outlook on life. This is where tracks like Ghost and Atlas emerged from. In Claudio's words, the anticipation of fatherhood while understanding I would have to leave my child to go on tour. This coalesced into The Color Before the Sun in 2015, an altogether more personal album than anything that had been done before. While fans and critics might have been a little alarmed by the sudden break from tradition, they still loved the record. Like all of Coheed's albums, Color Before the Sun picked up rave reviews and soared into the Billboard Top 10. But where did this leave the band? Was the Amory Wars really done? Absolutely not. Refreshed after a break from the sprawling Amory Wars universe, the band came back in a big way. In 2018, the band recorded their 9th album, this time on Roadrunner Records. Vax's Act 1, The Unheavenly Creatures, offers yet more narrative threads for fans to delve into. This time, Coheed was moving forwards in time, introducing the characters of Creature and Sister Spider, in a narrative set after the end of Good Apollo, imprisoned on a planet called the Dark Sentencer. This was followed by Act 2 of a planned 5-album sequence. The Window of the Waking Mind continues the tale of Creature and Sister Spider, but works real-world elements into the narrative. Claudio had said that tracks like Ladders of Supremacy were inspired in part by the murder of George Floyd, while The Liars Club and Comatose filter the trauma of the COVID pandemic through the band's fantastical prism. And of course, Claudio was now a father, so tracks like Blood and Our Love reflects his family life. It's a real document of how far the band have come, writing intricate, mind-bending science fiction fantasy, but rooting it in the complexities of real life. Claudio would continue this personal thread on Act 3, The Father of Make-Believe, weaving in the return of old characters like Afterman's Sirius and Mary Amory, characters who, you may remember, were inspired by Claudio's grandparents. So far, the Vax's albums have been released alongside graphic novellas that flesh out the story and add more weight to the wonderful, emotional world building. We're just past the halfway point in Coheed and Cambria's latest pentology, so expect more amazing stuff to come in the near future. Coheed and Cambria's story has been an incredible one, and it's still far from over. The band's prog-emo development has unfolded alongside a sprawling work of fiction that reads like a sci-fi Lord of the Rings, with Claudio Sanchez, along with Chandra and his Coheed bandmates, authoring his incredible vision like an emo J.R.R. Tolkien. So what do you think? Did you dive into the comics and graphic novels, or did you just vibe with the awesome music the band was making? Which of the Amory Wars installments is your favorite, or do you prefer the more personal Color Before the Sun? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe. Oh, and as always, stick right where you are for more fascinating emo explorations coming right up.